Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us on our journey through the Bible, taking a look at music. In the Hebrew text, Chronicles is only one book. In the later years, it was divided up into two, probably could not fit on one vellum scroll. So it was divided up into two, like Samuel, Kings, all of those. So we take up First Chronicles. The first reference to music that we have is in chapter 9. It says, "Those who were musicians, heads of the Levite families, stayed in the rooms of the temple and were exempt from other duties because they were responsible for the work day and night." Yes, they were responsible for the work of music day and night. The priests lived to make music. They were supported by the ministry to do the work of ministry, of music, full-time, 24/7. So few churches today seem to take this as a model. Chronicles 13. David and all the Israelites were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with songs and with harps, with lyres and tambourines, cymbals and trumpets. Now I love several things about this. One is, it looks like we have the full orchestra. We have the string section with the harps and the lyres. That would be what we would think of as a string section. Tambourines and cymbals, which are the percussion section. Trumpets, the brass section. Here we don't have woodwinds mentioned, but it may have been so noisy that you wouldn't have heard the woodwinds. So the first point is that they're using all the instruments. Again, one of these things that is actually done in very few churches today. Second thing is, this was not casual for them. They performed, they sang, they played with all their might, with all of their energy, everything that was in them. They gave 100%. It was a grand celebration. It was beautiful. And again, there are many people who seem like they might be ready to fall asleep when they're doing music in the church, but they were enthusiastic. And sometimes we look down on those who are enthusiastic today. Chronicles chapter 15. "Now David was clothed in a robe of fine linen, as were all the Levites who were carrying the ark, and as were the singers, and Ananiah, who was in charge of the singing of the choirs. David also wore a linen ephod." Now, from this passage, the only thing that I notice is that Ananiah, was in charge of the choirs. Okay, there may be a few other points. So they dressed nicely when they sang to the Lord. Now, a couple things. One is, I was raised in a church. When I was younger, we went to a church where it was the thing to dress casually. People just came from home whatever way they were dressed. Some people came in from work when they went to church. And there was no stigma attached with being casual. In fact, in some churches today, it seems like there's a spiritual preference for those who are not formal, as if those who are informal are more spiritual than those who are formal. And there's this balance. On one side, really, people should feel comfortable coming to church, whatever way they come. And a person who doesn't have the finances to buy something fancy, something that's going to impress their neighbors, should feel just as comfortable worshiping God in church as somebody who has the means to buy the fanciest clothes. It's great for people who could do that. They should actually feel comfortable coming into the church and worshiping God. But the person who has nothing and has no means to get something fancy should be comfortable coming in whatever they have, dress in whatever's your best, and come. And they should feel accepted and loved and join in worship with people who are not paying attention to those things, looking past the clothes and straight into the eyes, recognizing people as people. So that's on one side. On the other side is there's a time for celebration. Like at our school, we often have concerts. When we have concerts, we all dress formally. And we have grand celebration. And many times the audience will also dress formally to come for our concerts. There's a place for that. So we can worship God just as we are, and we can have special times and special circumstances where we worship the Lord dressed in our best, being as fancy and as cool as we possibly can. Just for the matter of celebration, not to impress our neighbor, just to enjoy and celebrate what God has done. Chronicles, still continuing, so those who were following in the Bible, 1 Chronicles, chapter 15. David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even on harps and psalteries and timbrels, and on cornets, and on cymbals. Again, the full woodwinds, notice at the beginning, and strings, and brass, and percussion. So all Israel brought up the ark of the covenant of the Lord with shouts and the sounding of ram's horns and with trumpets and cymbal and the playing of lyres and harps. All Israel, everyone participated, not just the trained musicians. The whole congregation was involved. Again, this should be a pattern. We should see everybody is involved. And David spoke to the chief of the Levites to appoint their brothers to be singers, with instruments of music, psalteries and harps and cymbals, sounding by lifting up their voice with joy. Lifting up their hearts with joy. Singing, again, repeated themes, all these instruments. Just great grand celebration. Now, that brings us to 2 Chronicles. There aren't that many songs, not many references to music in 2 Chronicles, but when we get to chapter 20, there's a really, really, really interesting story. And let me just set the stage for you. What happened is Israel was being invaded, and there were several armies, several countries from around them have joined forces. And each one of these countries has a trained military. Each one of them was battle-trained, battle-worn. They had the experience of fighting. They had the weapons that were necessary. Israel at this time didn't have great defenses. They were few in number. They didn't have many in the military that were well trained. They knew that they were outnumbered at least 10 to 1. And they were facing an impossible situation. So they cried out to God. And God answered them and said, "The battle belongs to the Lord." You may know some songs that are based on that passage in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. The battle belongs to the Lord. Just relax, it's going to be okay. So the king takes the musicians and puts them at the beginning, at the front of the army. Now, I don't know about you, but the places that I've been, at least in the U.S. and in India, the musicians are usually not the people you'd think of as putting at the front of the army. You wouldn't think of them as the great warriors necessarily. Some are pretty fit, I guess, but most are not, like the movie stars that have all the muscles and big guns and all that kind of thing. But they put the musicians at the front. It sounds like a formula for losing a battle. But as they're going out, they worship God. They sing praises to God. And while they're singing praises to God, God confuses the invading armies. They begin to fight against each other, and they wipe each other out. So Israel, again, without having to even raise a finger in battle, in really quite a non-violent way as far as they were concerned, they win the victory over an invading force that was far outnumbering their own. God wins a fantastic victory on their behalf. And as they're returning back from the battle, if it can be called a battle, they rejoice, they sing, they praise God. So you see this pattern. They bring their problem to God. God gives an answer from a prophet, and so the people worship and thank God. Then they, as they're entering the battle, facing the opposition, they are singing praises to God. God wins the victory for them, so they return again singing praises to God for what he has done. This is a beautiful, blessed circle You may have heard of a vicious cycle which spirals downward. This is a blessed cycle that spirals upward. And that brings us towards the end of Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter 29 says, with them, Heman and Jeduthun, with trumpets and cymbals for those that should make a sound, and with the musical instruments of God. And the sons of Jeduthun were porters. So they're just naming the people who were the musicians. If I had a chance to have my name in the Bible, I would really be happy. 2 Chronicles, again, 29, just a few verses down, one verse down. And the Levites stood with the instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. So please notice, those who were trained for ministry were musicians. And the musicians were trained for ministry. Sometimes, especially in this world, becoming a musician requires such rigorous training that it's reserved for just those people who have a calling, who have a passion for it, a desire, and who are willing to work day after day, week after week, year after year to develop their skills. And so for many people, if you are going to be a musician, you may not be training to be in the ministry because it takes years to train for the ministry too. But in the time of the Bible and the Old Testament, the priests were the musicians and vice versa. So, chapter 30. Hezekiah commanded to offer the burnt offering upon the altar. And when the burnt offering began, the song of the Lord began also, with trumpets, with instruments obtained by David, king of Israel. Again, the use of several instruments, and along with the offering that is given on the altar, so the sacrifice that was given, the music goes up. They go together. And the children of Israel that were present at Jerusalem kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with great gladness. And the Levites and the priests praised the Lord day by day, singing with loud instruments unto the Lord. My ears are oversensitive. So I find loud noises painful. And I remember when I was younger, I would sing in retirement homes. And I would see some of the people, my voice is kind of loud. And sometimes they would start doing this. And sometimes you could hear their hearing aids start to go. And I tried to be sensitive to that. But now I am that person. I find it difficult when it's loud. But it's biblical to have loud music. And we have to be careful that we don't damage our hearing. There's a lot of research on that. If you're exposed to more than about even 90, 100 decibels over a prolonged period of time, you can have permanent ear damage. My ears are naturally sensitive, and maybe because of all the musical training, my ears have been a bit overworn, also because of the noise of the traffic here. But loud music is biblical, and we should embrace it. So many beautiful lessons we have from the book of Chronicles concerning music. God help us to apply these lessons today, to use a variety of instruments in the church, to get everybody involved, to have moments, times, seasons when we all just put on our best, to have the full orchestra playing as much as possible, and to have people who are dedicated, their lives are set aside just for music and worship to God. God bless you.